morning and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about change in relationships. One of the things that scares us the most in marriage is the notion or the fear that the person that we have in front of us today may become somebody completely different tomorrow. Or the notion or some of the qualities that we love in our partner today may fade away or may just be the opposite 10, 20, 30 years from now. That has been my own experience as well. So today, I'm going to be talking to you about my experience in marriage and in my past relationships with change, the lessons that I learned from it, and how I apply those lessons today to minimize the impact of change and on my relationships. So first thing, to give you some context, I got married when I was 25 years old. I was very young, and one of the things that significantly contributed to my divorce was change. I changed a lot from when I was 25 to when I was 30. A lot of my goals evolved. I evolved. My vision of life also evolved. And eventually, I found myself and my ex-wife moving in completely opposite directions. So, without getting into too much detail, here are the two main things that I learned throughout that experience. The first one is that change is inevitable. No matter how we plan, no matter how we try not to, we are all going to change because we're constantly evolving. And like someone once said, the only thing constant in life is change. So that's one. Second thing is that the change I learned as I was changing, I realized that the change that happened from 25 to 30 is completely different than the change that happened in me from 30 to 35 and now above 35. And the older I got, the less I've changed. Those are the two main things. Now, the question is, knowing all that now, how do I apply that today when I meet someone in my relationship? How can you take these lessons to improve your approach today to minimize the chances of you finding yourself in a situation where in the future you're again with someone and end up looking in opposite directions? So the first point, like I talked about, to that first point about how change is inevitable, I would say when we meet someone, at least when I meet someone, rather than try to keep that person from changing, or rather than try to make sure that the person doesn't change, I expect that they're going to change. And when I expect that they're going to change, then what I need to do is try to anticipate how they may change. And the way that I found to do that is to have a very detailed conversation with the person around vision of life or just general life direction. I think it's something we don't do enough when we meet people. We don't have enough conversation around where we're going long term. We talk about basic general things, but we don't go in depth about like our vision of life, our fundamental direction. Like, where is it that we see? What is it that drives us? What is it that would define success? What is it that we would like to? What is it that I would love to do if I had the money, all the money in the world? If I had all the success in the world, what is it that I would love to do in at that time, right? Those conversations in the beginning help determine the general direction in which we're looking at life. It helps determine, a general direction of our lives. And ideally, we want to have, or ideally, we want to have a similar general direction. So then we know that if we're both looking this way, and even though we're going to change as we go, evolve up and down, at the very least, we know that no matter how we change, because we have the same general direction in life, that we're going to always be looking in the same direction. Now, if we start in the beginning looking in opposite directions, then as we change, we're only going to move further away from each other. Even if we're not looking in opposite direction, but we're looking slightly we're looking in directions that are, diverging. As we change, we're going to diverge more. So take time in the beginning to talk about your life vision, your life goals, your life direction, and make sure that there's alignment in the beginning. That's my first advice. That's what I do today for my own self. The second thing is understanding that the older you are, the less chances there's going to be a drastic change. And I think what's scary about change is not change. The little changes are fine. They're part of life. What's scary is the drastic changes. So for me personally today, in order to minimize the chances that I'm going to get with someone that's going to turn around tomorrow and have a drastic life change, I try my best to get with people that are a little older. In my experience, and again, I say in my experience, I think people generally get a good sense of direction in their life past 25 years old. For women, I think it's in their late 20s, mid to late 20s, and for men, late 20s to early 30s. And again, this is my opinion. This is not a fact. It's based on my own person, the experience of the people around me, and some of my readings. So take that for what it's worth. But generally, I just believe that the older we are when we make significant life-altering decisions, the less chances that we have to find ourselves tomorrow changing drastically and wanting to reverse course or wanting to go different directions, or finding ourselves with a partner that wants to do something completely different from what they initially wanted to do. The third point, and a very important one, is as much as I expect people to change, I don't plan for it, right? So when I meet someone, I never plan for the person that they're going to become. I never plan for the change that is going to happen in a positive way, right? And I think it's a mistake that we do very often, where we meet someone and rather than choosing the person in front of us, we choose the person that we think they're going to become. And that's something that I've learned not to do anymore. So when you meet someone, ask yourself the question that if this person were not to change at all, and were to stay exactly the way they are today for the rest of our lives, would I be happy with them? Would I be okay being married to them? And if the question is no, then don't get with them. And certainly do not say yes to the person today because you're hoping or thinking they're going to become something else tomorrow that meets what you want today. That's the third lesson. Now, all this being said, one thing that must be said is that life itself is unpredictable. There's no formula. And you can spend all this time and use all this advice to make decisions and still find yourself in a situation down the line where you're with a partner and either your partner evolves into something completely different or you evolve into something completely different. I think in those situations, it's very important to communicate, to talk about it, rather than try to hide it or run away from it and then be unhappy. I think it's important that we face it, that we express ourselves, try to understand where it's coming from, try to understand why we feel the way we feel, express it, share with our partner, and try to really find a middle ground. Do our best to find a middle ground to work with it. In most cases, if you have the right relationship, you should be able to find a middle ground. But in some cases, if you're really, really opposite in directions, there may not be a middle ground. And we must accept in those situations that rather than continue to move together and pull in opposite direction, which is exhausting for everyone, that maybe we're better off moving separately. So one thing we can't do is become prisoners of our choices. What matters is that we're honest with ourselves, honest with our partners, give our best, try our best to find a middle ground. And if we have really done our best and we can't, then maybe it's time to go our separate ways, and that's okay. I've been there, learned my lesson, and I hope that you can learn something from my experience and make better decisions for yourself in the future. On that note, until next time.